Hi, I'm Elizabeth Myers, and today I want to talk to you about courageous freedom, about finding the courage to live a holy adventure in the freedom of Christ. Being a mother of 8 means that my life is almost always an adventure, whether I want it to be or not. To be honest, the adventure that I'm living isn't the one I would have necessarily chosen for myself, but don't you know that God's plans are always bigger and better than our own? But it takes courage to step out in faith and follow Jesus, and to sometimes live differently than the world around us. Yet that's often exactly what he asks us to do. Some time ago, I lost my son during the second trimester of pregnancy, and that really sent me into a dark time in my life where I questioned everything that I had believed about God. I really wrestled with my faith, and I struggled with depression and anxiety. And now, 10 years later from that dark time in my life, I have written a book and ran a marathon, both in the same year. And that just amazes me at the things that God can do in our lives when we say yes to Him, when we turn it over to Him. Who knew that the woman who doubted her faith in God would write a book on living victoriously and on believing God anyway? And who would have ever thought that the girl who fell out of nearly every run in basic military training would go on to run a marathon? Only God can do stuff like that. These are the kinds of adventures that He calls us on. And today I want to encourage you and inspire you to follow God on the adventure that He has planned for you. Finishing a marathon and completing a book both require the same mindset of me. I had to push aside those self-limiting beliefs that told me that I couldn't, and trust God to go out to where I felt He was calling me, and to just move forward one baby step at a time until the thing was done. I'm not superhuman. I'm just an ordinary, messed up person like everyone else, with too many things to do and too little time to get it all done. I don't do anything that other people can't do, but I do things that other people are often unwilling to do. But today I want to encourage you that to step out and follow Jesus on these adventures is totally worth the effort that you put into it. We experience true freedom when we choose to trust God enough to step forward and follow Him wherever He invites us to go. So before we can talk about living in courageous freedom, we have to talk about those frustrating fetters, those things that hold us back. We know God has called us to something bigger, but we feel stuck, unable to push past those limitations that hold us back. And I know, especially as a mother with young children, it's really hard to move out of survival mode long enough to feel like you could move forward in anything. I know parenting is a long-range project, and sometimes it can get frustrating on the day-to-day level when nothing you do seems to stay done, right? The beds get unmade again, the clothes get dirty and unfolded and thrown on the floor again. The dishes need washing again, and once again there's enough hardened Cheerios in the back of the van to make a bird feeder. No wonder it can be a challenge every day just to get out of bed and show up for work. There are lots of things that we could list as fetters or limitations in our life. We don't have the time, we don't have the money or the energy or the education, but actually at the root of all of them is fear. That's our default state. Although human beings are much happier when we choose to trust God, that's not where we're naturally inclined to go. We often fail to recognize our truer purpose, or perhaps we sense that it's there, but we're too afraid to pursue it, because things like self-condemnation or judgment or intimidation or even self-doubt hold us back, which self-doubt is really just doubting God, because it's doubting what He's able to do through us. The things we name are really just excuses. The truth is, we don't trust God enough to step out. We don't believe that He'll actually be there to meet us when we need Him. We fear that He'll leave us hanging. Maybe we've been disappointed by something in the past, or maybe we feel like God has let us down at some other point, and it makes it hard to trust Him now. Believe me, I get it. We often can't perceive what God's up to or see His bigger plan, and so it does feel scary and intimidating to us. I know stepping out in faith to have a larger than average size family was very scary for me a lot of times, and I remember a time when my 4th child was born, and I was leaving the hospital a little bit early, and the nurse came to do all the paperwork and to check us out, and she had a checklist of things she was supposed to go over. This is how you care for a new baby, etc. And she just kind of looked at me and the other 3 children that were gathered around there, and she said, "Either you're crazy or you don't, or you already know what you're doing. So either way, I can't help you." And she just let me go. So how do we get past our fear and let go of these fetters? That's with transformative faith. Choosing to believe God anyway and learning to take Him at His word enables us to trust Him, and that allows us to move forward into greater freedom. Faith is the opposite of fear, and faith will conquer fear. And when we're wrestling with having some fear and some faith and the two are struggling against each other, the one that will win out is the one that we feed. So I encourage you to feed your faith, not your fear. When we dwell on our limitations or the things that we're afraid of, then that grows stronger. But when we dwell on the Word of God and time spent in prayer with Him and who He is, then our faith is what grows stronger. I love in Romans chapter 8 where it says, Jesus has already died for you. He's already given His whole life for you. Don't you know that He will give you everything else that you need to live out the purpose for which He's called you to? When we can just believe that, when we can take Him at His word, then that eliminates the fear. We can just trust that when we step out, He will be there to meet us. Now, I know what I'm saying is not easy. It's easy to say, it's not easy to do. I've been there myself. When I lost my son, Timothy, I went off the rails into depression. I believed that God had abandoned me. I thought that He had walked out on me in my darkest time, and I didn't take Him at His word anymore. I didn't believe that what He said was true, that He wouldn't never leave me, because I felt that He had. So I'm not asking you to do anything that I haven't already had to do myself. I'm just encouraging you not to wait as long as I did. I suffered with untreated depression for 5 years because I was busy being angry at God and blaming Him for something He didn't do and refusing to turn to Him for help. When we experience this transformative faith and live in the freedom that Christ calls us to, it can seem crazy to a watching world. And that's why it takes insane courage. I think about Joshua in the Battle of Jericho, and God comes down and says, here's your battle plan, is to march around the city with the band. That takes courage to do something that crazy and that non-standard. But Joshua is also the one to whom God said, be strong and courageous, be bold, because I'm with you and I won't leave you. So I'm not talking about being different just for the sake of being different, although that's not necessarily bad. What I'm talking about is being willing to look different or to be different or even to be thought of as crazy because you're being obedient, because you're following God. I know that for me, when I had pregnancy after pregnancy, and there was another one that we were announcing, and friends, family, even people at church would call me crazy, literally to my face, would say that I was crazy, and I would always think to myself, I'm really not crazy. I'm just being obedient. I'm just saying yes to the one who died for me. That was my motivation. That was my drive. Obedience to God, which is really choosing to follow Him on a holy adventure, can seem crazy to a watching world. They don't understand. They don't get it because they're not in that same place of faith, in that same relationship with God. I love Nicole Nordeman's song that says, I'll be a fool for you. Jesus made Himself look foolish by the world's standard for us. How can we not at least do that for Him too? So once we start getting a hold of this idea of this transformative faith and believing God and taking Him at His word, then we need to start moving forward. We need to take the next step. If we want to live in the freedom that Jesus offers us, we need to take an active role. It takes courage to move forward in freedom and to follow God on the latest adventure that He has planned for you. But I want to tell you that courage is not the absence of fear. The absence of fear can sometimes be called stupidity. But courage is being afraid and choosing to do the right thing anyway. Sometimes we just have to do it scared. I think about the man that Jesus healed in the book of John, chapter 5. I call him the mat man, but he was the paralyzed man, and Jesus walked up to him and said, do you want to get well? And He told the man, pick up your mat, take up your mat and walk and go. And He asked the man, do you want this? And then He said, this is what you have to do to get that. Jesus offers us that healing and that freedom, but we have to be willing to pick up our mat and to take that next step, even on legs that may be a little shaky or maybe take steps that we've never taken before. Jesus opens the prison door for us, but we have to get up off of our mat and walk out of the cell and into the freedom that He has already won for us. We must do our part. Stepping forward in faith is an active role in our lives. It's not a passive thing. It means that we have to listen to God's voice more than we listen to the voice of other people around us. And I want to encourage you that every step that is in the right direction matters, even the baby steps. Direction is more important than speed, by far. We want to move forward in confidence, not that we're going to do everything right or everything's going to work out smoothly, but that God is working on our behalf to work everything together for good in the end before it's all said and done. You can't steer a bike that's just stationary. You have to push off and get the bike moving before you can steer it. And maybe when you first push off, if you're new at learning to ride a bike, it's a little bit wobbly and you might have a few falls and bumps and scrapes, but that's all part of the learning process. But you have to get out there and get started before you can steer. You can't learn to ride a bike by sitting on your couch. You're going to have to get out there and get your knees banged up a little if you want to go beyond your own backyard. What if you had to wait until every light was green before you could get in the car and drive here today? Where would you be right now? Well, you wouldn't be here, that's for sure, because that's not the way it works, right? We have to get in our car and get started when the light is still red. And sometimes that's the way it works with our faith, is we're not going to see everything fall into place perfectly before we can go out and take that next best step. But I'm not advocating running red lights. I'm not encouraging lawlessness here. So as we move forward, like I said earlier, we need to know which direction we're going, because direction is more important. So as we're stepping out forward, even if it's baby steps, we want to make sure that in every step that we're following Jesus. And following Jesus means that we need to get gutsy enough to get out of the boat and to step onto those waves where he's inviting us to go out on an adventure with him. When we focus on ourselves, that leads to great insecurity. But when we focus on Jesus and who he is and what he is capable of, that's where we find our security and are grounded in that truth. When I'm trusting in myself, I'm insecure. I'm always striving. I'm trying to prove myself. I wrestle with perfectionism, and I feel up when I thought I did great, and I'm down when I think I did poorly. But when we're secure in Christ, it's a totally different picture. We're not striving anymore. Then we're resting. We're trusting in his grace. We have peace in his plan, and it's not all on our shoulders, and it's not all about us. So as we move forward, we need to be sure that we're keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus, because he's the one we're following. As we move forward, taking these baby steps and following Jesus, our start may be small, but our vision should be big. We serve a big God, and he has big plans. If your plans and dreams and aspirations are so small that you don't need God to intervene or else you're sunk, then you're not thinking big enough. God wants to do through us what is impossible for us to do alone, so that he gets all the credit when the thing is done. Our ultimate goal is not to draw people to ourselves, but to draw them to Jesus by letting the power and light of his love shine through all the broken places in our lives. Never be afraid to trust a daunting assignment to an infinite God. When we feed our faith to conquer our fear, then we are able to move forward following Jesus, and finally to learn to live in freedom. When we step out in faith, God will always meet us there. He will never leave us hanging. We were created to live in freedom and victory, but often we settle for much less. Sometimes claiming what's rightfully ours just seems too hard. But Jesus Christ paid such a big price for our freedom. It cost him everything. He's immortal, free from ever experiencing the pain of death, and yet he chose to come down here and to lay down his life for us. He faced and took on the agony of God's wrath against sin so that we don't ever have to experience that. We owe it to God. We owe it to Jesus to live courageously in the freedom that he's won for us. In short, a free life is a fruitful life. By following Jesus, we impact and inspire others who witness our holy adventure and want to live that way too, free and unfettered. So I hope you can see that we experience true freedom whenever we courageously trust God and follow him wherever he invites us to go. We often experience the frustration of feeling stuck in a life that is less than all that God has promised to us. We are afraid to leave our comfort zone and to risk trusting God. But it's only in stepping out in that faith and moving forward that we can go out and enjoy that freedom that Christ has won for us, and to live in the richness and fullness of all that God has promised. I encourage you to take the time to listen to God and to find out what he wants you to do in your family and in your church, in your community, and then step out courageously and do that with baby steps, trusting that God will meet you there when you step out. And trusting God looks different for everyone. Not everyone is called to the same adventure. Not everyone is going to be called to have 8 kids or to homeschool them or to write a book. You're called to something different. You need to find the thing that God has created you for, the purpose for which you exist, the reason why you're here. Maybe for some that might be serving in a ministry, or it might be choosing to have another child, or maybe it would be adopting, or helping another mother maybe who's struggling, or having a better attitude in the way we serve. It could be leading a small group, or maybe just meeting with a friend who needs to talk, or having the courage to share with someone about Jesus. And maybe you're going through a rough time right now, and maybe your loftiest goal for the day is just to get out of bed and have the courage to get dressed and to go out somewhere. I totally get that. I've been there myself. And maybe God is saying to you today, just don't give up. Don't quit. Keep going. Keep living another day, even if you can't see the fruits of your efforts yet. Your life does matter more than you know, to more people than you realize. Imagine for a moment what God could do in you and through you if you let go of that fear and just trust God and take that next best step. Insane courage is the road to true freedom, and you weren't meant to be anyone's slave. You belong to God. He made you and He died for you. You are twice His. So get out there and enjoy the crazy freedom that He has won for you. Have the courage to live differently than the world around you so that you can live in harmony with who God created you to be. Never be afraid to go out on a limb as long as you're going out there with Jesus, because that's where the real fruit is. Fruit doesn't grow on the safe surface of the trunk or in the comfort of the treehouse. You have to reach beyond all that to grab a hold of the fruitful life of freedom that God has intended for you. You only get one go at this life, and there's no guarantee how long it will last. What are you going to do with yours? Will you be gutsy for God's glory? I hope you will. Thank you.